I spent the whole morning trying to hide the panic behind glitter and streamers. There's a certain type of silence that settles in a room when your heart knows something isn't right before your mind admits it. I felt it as I taped up the last balloon in our backyard. It wasn't the wind or the quiet hum of the refrigerator inside. It was deeper, a stillness in the air that felt more like a warning than a pause. Everything was perfect, at least on the outside. The rainbow-colored banner stretched across our backyard fence said, "Happy 6th birthday, Lily," in bright, smiling letters. Her favorite cupcakes, pink frosting with little sugar puppies on top, sat arranged in a neat circle on the fold-out table I borrowed from our church. There were paper hats, party bags with tiny figurines, a bubble machine puffing out slow clouds of soap. But the yard was still empty. No kids. No cars pulling up. No little feet running across the grass. Just my daughter, sitting in her birthday dress, the rainbow one she picked out 2 months ago and insisted on wearing, even if it rains, clutching a party horn like it might make everything okay if she just blew hard enough. It was 2:07 p.m. The party was supposed to start at 2. Maybe they're just running late, I said, crouching beside her and fixing the bow in her hair. She nodded, her voice soft. Yeah, maybe the map thingy told them the wrong way. But I saw the flicker in her eyes. Kids know. Even when you try to hide it, they feel it. The tension, the truth trying to claw its way out of a smile. I checked my phone. No new messages. I had sent the invites myself, texted, emailed, even printed a few out for the school bulletin board. I confirmed RSVPs from 5 parents last week. "Of course we'll come," they said. "She's such a sweet girl," they added. One even promised to bring a homemade piñata, but the yard stayed empty. A breeze lifted a plastic cup off the table and sent it rolling into the grass. Lily didn't move. "Want a cupcake while we wait?" I asked, trying too hard. She shook her head. "Not yet. I want to wait until my friends get here." Her voice cracked on friends, and something in me cracked with it. I stood, pretending to tidy up napkins, but I turned away so she wouldn't see the tears. This wasn't the first time the world forgot about her, but it was the first time she was old enough to notice. Her dad would have made sure this day was unforgettable. He would have blasted classic rock from his old Bluetooth speaker, flipped burgers on the grill in his beat-up biker vest, and thrown Lily onto his shoulders like she was weightless. She always called him Captain Daddy, said he had superhero arms. But we buried those arms 2 years ago. He died in an accident so random, so cruel, it still doesn't make sense. One careless truck driver, one missed stop sign, one knock on the door, that changed everything. I had managed to hold it together for 2 years. For her, for bills, for bedtime stories and scraped knees, for the nights she cried herself to sleep with his photo under her pillow. I told myself we were okay, that I could be enough. But that lie was unraveling fast as I watched her clutch a party favor like a life preserver in an empty sea of silence. My phone buzzed. For a second, I thought maybe it was someone saying they were on the way. Maybe traffic. Maybe they forgot the address. But it was a text from another mom, anonymous number, but I knew exactly who it was from the tone. "Sorry, we won't be coming. Who wants to celebrate a girl with no dad? No punctuation. No name. Just that." It hit me like a slap. And then the second wave came. The cold, slow wave of realization that it wasn't just one person. It was what they all thought. No dad. No party worth showing up for. I felt my face go numb. My fingers tightened around the phone. I wanted to scream, to throw it across the yard. But then I looked at Lily. She was still sitting there, still waiting, still hoping. She turned to me with the softest smile, one she'd practiced so many times since he died. That fake, "I'm fine" smile she wore for my sake, and I wore for hers. We had become experts in silent survival. I think they're just lost, she said. Maybe they need more time. I nodded, because what else could I do? I turned on the Bluetooth speaker. His old one. I found his playlist, Springsteen, Fleetwood Mac, Tom Petty, and let it play. Maybe it would make it feel like he was there. Maybe it would fill in the emptiness. The bubble machine kept puffing. The cupcakes started to melt. I poured myself a paper cup of juice just to give my hands something to do. And then Lily said something that nearly broke me in two. She leaned in close and whispered, "Mommy, maybe Daddy's friends forgot me too." Her little voice was so quiet, so unsure, like even her hope had started to shrink. "No, baby," I said, kneeling down beside her. "They didn't forget you. No one who ever met you could forget you." She nodded slowly but didn't say anything, just looked at the driveway again. Still empty. A part of me wanted to pack it all up, to protect her, to erase this entire day and pretend it never happened. But she had been counting down for weeks, talking about her big girl party, drawing pictures of balloons and friends and cake, writing her name on the invitations with glitter pens. She deserved a celebration, even if it was just the two of us. So I grabbed a cupcake and held it out. "Happy birthday, Lily Bean," I said with a soft smile. She took it and whispered, "Thanks, Mommy." I lit the candle. Just one. She closed her eyes. And in that quiet moment, I swear I saw her lips move around the word, "Daddy." Then she blew it out. I clapped for her, loud and cheerful. Yay, big six. She smiled, but the spark was dim. Her eyes flicked once more toward the street. "Maybe they'll come tomorrow," she said. I hugged her tightly, pressing my lips into her hair, so she wouldn't see me cry. Inside, I was collapsing, not just from the heartbreak, but from the helplessness, from the invisible wall between us and the rest of the world, from the cruel way people erase you when your story doesn't fit their mold. No one wants to deal with the girl whose husband died on a Tuesday afternoon. No one wants to be reminded that grief doesn't expire just because the calendar turns. And no one wants to show up to a party that reminds them life can break beautiful things. But she was still beautiful, still worth celebrating, still here. I stood up, wiped my tears, and took her hand. "Let's dance," I said. She giggled. "To Daddy's songs?" "To Daddy's songs." So we danced, just the two of us, her rainbow skirt twirling, her tiny feet stepping on mine. The music played louder. Our laughter floated in the air, trying to cover the silence. And for a moment, it worked, until she looked up again and asked, "Do you think they read my letter?" I froze. "What letter, baby?" She bit her lip. "The one I wrote for Daddy. The one I put in the mailbox." My heart slowed. "When did you do that?" "Last week," she said. "I found one of his old letters with names on it from his motorcycle friends. So I wrote one too. I told them it's my birthday. I said I miss Daddy, and maybe they could come instead." She paused. "I didn't tell you, 'cause I wanted it to be a surprise." Tears hit my cheeks before I could stop them. She looked down. "Sorry, Mommy." I cupped her face. No, baby, that's not something to be sorry for. That's beautiful." She smiled, shy and hopeful again. "But I guess they're busy too," she whispered. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth, that the address might not even exist anymore, that they probably moved on, that sometimes the world forgets too easily. But deep down, something stirred. A memory of his club jacket, the names embroidered in white thread, the creased envelope he kept in his drawer. One name stood out, Stitch. I hadn't thought about them in years, but maybe, just maybe, that letter found its way. And maybe the silence wasn't the end of the story. Maybe it was the pause before something louder arrived. Something with engines. Something with leather. something that still remembered. The night before the party, I had found her sitting cross-legged on her bed, flashlight in hand, scribbling something onto a piece of notebook paper. I thought she was doodling again. Another rainbow, another picture of her, me, and him holding hands like nothing had changed. But when I leaned in and asked what she was doing, she just looked up and said, "Homework, Mama, secret homework." I smiled and kissed her forehead. "Well, don't stay up too late with it, okay?" She nodded, but her eyes were dancing with something more than bedtime delay tactics. They had that sparkle, the kind that only shows up in little kids when they believe in something bigger than the world has ever shown them. I should have asked more questions, but I was tired, and sometimes when your heart's been broken long enough, you stop asking questions you're scared to know the answer to. It wasn't until the morning after the party, after the cupcakes had gone stale, the balloon strings had drifted into corners, and Lily had quietly retreated into her room, that I found it, a folded piece of paper tucked behind her dollhouse chimney, slightly crinkled, written in blue crayon. "Dear Daddy's friends, my name is Lily. I'm 6 now. My daddy was in your motorcycle club. He had big arms and a loud laugh and a beard that tickled. He said you were like his brothers. My birthday is tomorrow. It's hard without him. I know he's with the angels now, but maybe you can come. Please come. Love, Lily." Underneath, she'd drawn a picture of a big group of people with helmets standing around a little girl in a rainbow dress. They were all smiling. Even the sky had hearts in it. I sat down on the edge of her bed and just stared at it. Grief comes in waves, they say, but this wasn't a wave. It was a flood, not because of what she wrote, but because she believed someone would read it, that it would matter, that somewhere in the big wide world, love could still echo, still respond. She had no idea what club he'd actually been part of, just knew he had friends who roared in on chrome, laughed around fire pits, and wore leather jackets with patches on the back. She called them Dad's motorcycle superheroes. I traced the edge of her letter with my fingers, heart thudding. I remembered a name, Stitch, scribbled on an envelope years ago, folded up next to old photos in the drawer I never opened anymore. Photos I kept locked away because looking at them felt like opening a wound that never truly closed. I went digging through the drawer like a woman possessed. Mementos, death certificate, sympathy cards. And then I found it. The envelope. Old. Yellowed. But still legible. A return address written in jagged, ink-bleeding letters. Stitch, Little Angels, MC. Box 422, 3 Pines, Oregon. I stared at it for a long time. Little Angels. That was the club. He never talked much about them near the end. Said he wanted to settle down. Said they weren't like they used to be. But I remembered how he lit up when he got a call from one of them. How he'd lean against the wall, laughing with a kind of freedom I rarely saw. They were his second family. Maybe they'd want to know. Maybe someone out there still cared. I pulled out a clean envelope, copied the letter word for word, and included Lily's original in her crayon scrawl. I added a photo, the last one we had of him and Lily at the park. She was on his shoulders, arms stretched wide like wings. He was laughing, his beard tangled with cotton candy. I sealed it. I didn't tell Lily. Not yet. Because honestly, I didn't want her heart to break again. It was one thing to be forgotten by classmates, another thing entirely to be forgotten by your father's so-called brothers. I dropped it in the mailbox 2 towns over, the kind of out-of-the-way post office that still had that old creaky door and a mail clerk who hummed to herself. As I walked back to the car, I felt stupid. Stupid for hoping. Stupid for thinking a letter from a 6-year-old might move men I hadn't spoken to in years. Men who probably hadn't thought about us since the funeral. But there was something in Lily's handwriting, something raw, pure, unfiltered by adult logic or bitterness. It reminded me that she didn't just lose a father. She lost a future filled with birthday balloons and shoulders to ride on and biker club parades that she never got to see. And I couldn't give her her dad back. But maybe, just maybe, someone else could give her something he would have wanted her to have. Connection, remembrance, joy. Still, a week passed. No call, no letter, no roar of engines. The day before her birthday, I came home to find Lily watching the driveway again. Waiting. Quiet. She didn't ask about the letter, but I knew she was still hoping. I wanted to sit her down and tell her gently that sometimes people don't get letters, that sometimes life doesn't wrap itself up in neat little endings, that grown-ups move on. But I didn't, because even though my hope was tired and small, it was still there. Later that night, she fell asleep with her arms wrapped around her stuffed bunny, the one with one eye missing. I stood by her door, watching her chest rise and fall, the way her little hand twitched in sleep like she was still writing words in the air. And I whispered to the silence, God, if there's anything left in this world that still remembers him, bring it to her. The next morning, we set the table again. Same decorations, same cupcakes, fewer balloons, because I didn't have the energy to refill them. Just me and her trying again. 2 p.m. came and went. And once again, no one showed. I brought out a cupcake, lit the candle. She didn't say a word. She just looked at it. Then back at the driveway, I saw her little throat tighten, the tears threatening to fall, but held back with the same kind of bravery her dad used to wear on long rides. And then, at 2:17 p.m., it happened. The faintest sound, distant, unmistakable, a low rumble, not a car, not a truck, a motorcycle, then another, and another. The sound grew louder, deeper, like thunder rolling toward us on wheels. Lily stood up so fast her chair fell backwards, her eyes wide. Mama, she whispered. I turned to the street, and my breath caught in my throat. A line of motorcycles, not just 3 or 4, but at least 10, turning down our little cul-de-sac like it was a highway built just for them. Chrome flashing in the sun, jackets with worn patches catching the breeze, tires crunching softly on gravel. They weren't fast. They weren't showy. They were deliberate, as if they knew exactly what they were riding toward. Lily clutched my hand, and then she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom, that's my letter. I looked down at her. What? She nodded, eyes glued to the bikes. That's my letter. They read it. The front bike rolled to a stop right at the edge of our driveway. A man stepped off, older, gray in his beard, tattoos creeping down both arms. His leather vest read, Stitch, President, Little Angels, MC. I recognized him immediately. He took off his helmet, walked forward slowly, then stopped just before us. Ma'am, he said, eyes misting over. We got your little girl's letter. He knelt down in front of Lily, and I'm real sorry we're late. The street didn't just fill with motorcycles. It filled with something else I hadn't felt in years. Weight, not the kind that drags you down, but the kind that reminds you something real just walked in, like thunder, like memory, like a promise finally kept. One by one, the bikes rumbled to a stop along our driveway and curb, as if the whole block had been waiting for them. Chrome gleamed in the sunlight. Leather jackets creaked as riders swung their legs over the seats and planted heavy boots on our lawn. The sound of idling engines slowly faded, replaced by the click of kickstands, the zip of helmet clasps, the quiet clearing of throats. And then silence, the kind of silence that follows after the storm, when you realize you're still standing, but the ground beneath you has shifted. I didn't know what to say. Neither did Lily. She just stared, eyes wide and shimmering, her little rainbow dress catching the breeze like a flag in the wind. One of the men stepped forward. Not Stitch. He stayed by the front, nodding solemnly, but a younger guy, tall, lean, with a soft look in his eyes despite the tattoos that ran down both arms like ivy. He carried something in his hands. A box, wrapped in purple paper with a silver bow. He knelt to her level. "You must be Lily," he said gently. She blinked, nodded, didn't speak, just looked at him like he might vanish if she breathed wrong. "I'm Spider," he added. "Your daddy used to ride with us. He was one of the best we ever had. Loudest laugh on the highway. Always made the rest of us stop to pet dogs." A few of the other bikers chuckled softly. "And when Stitch read your letter," Spider continued, "we figured he'd never forgive us if we didn't show up." He handed her the box. Her hands trembled as she took it. Her eyes never left his face. Then she turned to me, almost like she was asking if it was okay to believe what was happening. I nodded, voice caught in my throat. "Go ahead, baby." She slowly peeled the tape back, careful not to tear the paper, the way only a child who knows how rare gifts are would. Inside was a stuffed bear. But not just any bear. This one wore a tiny leather vest, stitched by hand. And on the back of that vest was her father's old club patch. A winged angel on a chopper, the same symbol I had tried to forget. The one that now felt like an embrace. Lily gasped and hugged the bear tight to her chest, then looked up again. "Did you know my daddy?" Spider nodded. "I did. He once rode all night just to make it to your first ultrasound." That made her smile, really smile, the kind where her dimples showed and her eyes scrunched up at the corners. Another biker stepped forward, older, with weathered hands and a face that looked like it had seen one too many winters. He said nothing, just walked to the table and gently set down a new cake box. It read, "Happy birthday, Lily, from all your uncles." It had rainbow icing, 6 candles, and a tiny fondant motorcycle riding across the top. That's when the tears came. Not from Lily, from me. I turned away quickly, trying to steady myself, trying to remember how to breathe. This wasn't just a visit. It wasn't a kind gesture. It was a resurrection of memory, of love, of everything I thought had died with him. Stitch finally walked forward then, his steps slow but solid, like the road still lived in his bones. "Ma'am," he said, removing his sunglasses. His eyes were steel blue, faded but sharp. "I don't know if he ever told you, but your husband was more than a member. He was family." I nodded, swallowing hard. "He told me once." He smiled faintly. "He should have told you more." Then he looked at Lily. "I heard you invited us. That true?" She nodded, Bear still clutched tightly in her arms. "Well, we're here," he said, crouching to her level. "And we don't show up empty-handed." From behind him, the rest of the crew began pulling out wrapped gifts, balloons, even a fold-up play tent shaped like a castle. One of the bikers held the leash to a tiny beagle puppy, its tail wagging so hard its whole body wiggled. Lily gasped, "Is that for me?" The biker, a huge guy with a deep voice, nodded. "He's called Rocket. Your dad always said you were going to be fast." I could barely keep up. In minutes, our backyard transformed. The lawn was filled with laughter. Music started, not from our speaker, but from a Bluetooth system someone brought and synced to a playlist of her dad's favorite songs. They lit the candles on the new cake, sang louder than any birthday chorus I'd ever heard. They didn't sing it soft or slow. They sang it the way bikers do everything. Full throttle, unapologetic, with cracked voices and full hearts. Lily clapped with every note. When she made her wish and blew out the candles, she looked up and whispered, "Did you hear that, Daddy?" Then she giggled and added, "They came." After cake, one of them gave her a ride around the block, just a slow loop, her arms wrapped tight around his vest, the puppy nestled in her lap in a tiny dog backpack. I watched from the edge of the lawn, arms folded, unsure if I was dreaming or watching a movie made for someone stronger than me. Spider came to stand beside me, sipping a can of soda. "She's got his smile," he said. I nodded. "And his stubbornness." "You did good, Mama," he said after a pause. "He always said you were tougher than any of us. Said if he ever couldn't be around, he knew she'd be safe." I turned to him. "He said that. All the time." I let the silence sit between us, then asked the question that had been haunting me since they showed up. "Why didn't anyone reach out after the funeral?" Spider sighed. "Truth is, we didn't know how." He was pulling away toward the end. Said he wanted a quieter life. Some of the guys thought maybe we were the loud part. "He did want that," I said softly. "But he never stopped loving you." He looked at me, eyes heavy. "I believe that, and we should have come sooner. But you gave us a chance to make it right." Lily came running up just then, face flushed, beaming. "Mom, come see. They wrote my name on a jacket." She twirled around to show me a custom vest, soft leather, her name embroidered in pink on the front. I crouched and ran my hand over it. "That's beautiful, baby." She looked up at Spider. "Can I ride with you again later?" He grinned. "Only if you promise not to race me." She giggled and ran off again. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I let go of the anger, of the loneliness, of the idea that we were forgotten, because somehow a crayon letter had traveled across states and hearts and years of silence, and brought back a piece of the man we loved, not just for a moment, but for a lifetime. They didn't just stay for cake. They stayed for everything. The party that started in stillness bloomed into the loudest, most unexpected symphony of joy our little neighborhood had ever seen. What began with chrome engines and weathered jackets unfolded into something far greater, a gathering of men who didn't come to mourn what was lost, but to celebrate what remained. Lily became the center of a world she never knew existed. It started with the jacket, her name stitched in pink thread on soft black leather, a tiny version of the ones the men wore, complete with a custom patch, not the full club insignia, but one just for her, a winged bear on a motorcycle. Above it, little angel cub. She wore it like a badge of honor, twirling around the yard, the bear she'd been gifted riding in the crook of her arm, the puppy bounding at her heels. She wasn't the girl whose dad was missing anymore, not in their eyes, not in hers. She was his daughter, and they made sure the world remembered that. One biker, Bones, a man with arms like tree trunks and a voice like gravel, set up a makeshift obstacle course using cones and sidewalk chalk. He coached Lily through it as she rode her mini trike, cheering her on like she was racing in the Grand Prix. Another, Tex, who had a southern drawl and an endless supply of balloon animals, made her a crown. Not a tiara, a real crown sculpted out of balloons that shimmered gold. "For the birthday queen," he said, bowing low as he placed it on her head. They fixed her broken toys, repainted her bike. One even stitched a patch onto her old teddy bear's belly, the same emblem her dad once wore on his vest, a winged angel holding a wrench. They didn't ask permission. They just knew, because these weren't strangers passing through. These were guardians, not in the way most people think, not legal, not official, not bound by court papers or titles, but in spirit, in memory, in promise. Stitch stayed mostly at the edges, watching, his face unreadable, but his eyes never strayed from Lily. At one point, he walked over to me and handed me something, a small leather-bound notebook. "What's this?" I asked. "Something your man wrote," he said quietly. He kept it with him on long rides. told us once it was his anchor. I found it in the old storage unit when I went looking for patches. I opened it, hands trembling. Inside were scraps of thoughts, scribbled memories, some messy, some poetic. One page stood out. If I don't make it home one day, I pray Lily grows up knowing the roar of engines isn't just noise. It's the sound of men watching over her. Men who would ride through fire just to make sure she knows she's never alone. I closed the notebook and pressed it to my chest. I wanted to say something, to thank him, to cry. But all I could do was nod. He understood. Sometimes silence says more than words ever could. The neighbors started coming out, one by one, drawn by the sound of laughter and low rock music. At first, they watched from across the street, wary. But then they saw Lily. They saw the puppy, the balloons, the way these men knelt in front of her, not to intimidate, but to match her height. Eventually, a few kids wandered over. One boy asked if he could pet the dog. One girl asked for a balloon crown. And just like that, the judgment melted, because no one could watch what was happening and not be moved. This wasn't chaos. It was community. Later in the afternoon, the bikers formed a loose circle around Lily. She stood in the center, still wearing her jacket and crown, Bear tucked under one arm, Rocket the puppy sniffing the grass at her feet. Stitch stepped forward. He cleared his throat. We've ridden thousands of miles for all kinds of reasons. Rallies, rescues, fundraisers, funerals. He paused. But this is the ride that mattered most. He looked at Lily. Your dad, he was the kind of man who'd give you the last bit of food in his bag. The kind who'd ride 6 hours just to make a 2-minute visit. He loved big, and he loved you bigger. Lily's eyes welled up. Stitch removed a small, tarnished pin from his vest, a winged angel holding a rose, and pinned it gently to hers. This belonged to him, he said softly. Now it belongs to you. She didn't say a word, just stepped forward and hugged him. A tight, sudden hug. The kind that says everything without needing to be explained. That broke him. He wrapped his arms around her, carefully, gently, like she was glass, like she was treasure. When they pulled apart, he whispered something in her ear that I couldn't hear. But I saw the smile that followed. It wasn't the kind of smile kids fake to make their parents feel better. It was real, full, alive. For the first time in a long time, she looked like a little girl who believed the world could still be magical. They gave her a birthday she'd never forget. Not because it was big or fancy or filled with gifts, but because it was sacred, built from loyalty, from memory, from the kind of love that doesn't vanish with time. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned to lavender and gold, the bikers began packing up. But not before one last surprise. Spider crouched next to Lily and handed her a small, folded map. "What's this?" she asked. "It's a special route," he said. "Your dad's favorite. We're going to ride it every year on this day." She looked at him wide-eyed. "Every year?" He nodded. "Every single one. Until you're old enough to lead the ride yourself." Her breath caught. I saw the seed of something planted in her, a sense of belonging, of legacy, of future. I stood behind her, holding her shoulders, overwhelmed, because somehow in a single afternoon they gave her more healing than I could have managed in years. They gave her joy, and they gave me peace. Not closure, that's a myth, but something better, a reminder that he hadn't been erased, that even though he wasn't here, his love still echoed loud enough to shake the ground. As they mounted their bikes, Lily ran up and hugged each one goodbye. She gave Spider a kiss on the cheek, Bones a high five, Tex a paper, drawing she'd made of all of them. Then she stood beside me as the engines roared back to life. They revved them in unison once, twice, 3 times. Then Lily raised her little fist in the air, And just like that, they rode off. Not into the sunset, but into our hearts. After the bikes disappeared down the block, a slow, rumbling parade trailing ribbons of memory, the stillness returned. But it was a different kind of stillness this time. Not the silence of absence, but the hush that follows something holy. Lily stood beside me, her hair tousled from wind and hugs, her new jacket crooked on her shoulders, the stuffed bear nestled under her arm. Rocket sat at her feet, tongue out, tail thumping softly against the grass. She didn't speak. Neither did I. We just watched the sun dissolve behind the houses, painting the clouds with soft orange streaks. A breeze drifted through the yard, rustling the paper decorations we never took down. The bubble machine let out one last lazy puff and sputtered to a stop. The party was over, but something told me it had only just begun. "Mom," Lily finally whispered without turning her head, "was that really all for me?" I bent to meet her eyes. "Every bit of it, baby." She nodded slowly, like she needed to file that truth deep into her bones. "They knew Daddy," she said. "They remembered." "They never forgot," I corrected gently. "Sometimes people just don't know how to say they still care. But they do. And when the right words come, or the right little girl sends the right letter, they find a way." She smiled softly. "So, Daddy sent them?" I paused, then nodded. "Yeah, I think he did. Because how else could you explain it? That letter, that timing, that chorus of engines pulling into our lives on the very day she needed them most. It wasn't coincidence. It was choreography. Divine. Intentional." A whisper turned into thunder. We went inside. Rocket followed, flopping onto the kitchen floor, like he already lived here. Lily set her bear on the counter and began unpacking her gifts, not in a frenzied rush like most kids, but carefully, almost reverently. Each one was unique, thoughtful. A hand-painted storybook, a custom puzzle of her, and her dad on his bike, a music box that played a classic rock lullaby. One package was just a letter. Inside was a note from Stitch. "Lily, your dad would have made this day magic. We just did our best to keep his promise. Whenever you feel like no one sees you, remember there's a whole family out there that does. We're not going anywhere. Ride proud, little angel." Stitch. She folded it slowly and tucked it into her bear's jacket, right beside the patch. That night, she didn't ask for her usual bedtime story. Instead, she climbed into my lap on the couch and held the notebook Stitch had given me. "Can you read something Daddy wrote?" she asked. I flipped through the pages until I found one that felt right. It wasn't long, just a paragraph. "She'll grow up fast, too fast, and one day she'll ask why I'm not there. But I hope someone tells her it wasn't because I didn't want to be. It's just that I had to go where wheels don't roll. If I can't give her a lifetime, let me leave behind people who'll give her pieces of me, bit by bit, until she feels whole again." My voice cracked. Lily rested her head against my chest. "I feel him," she whispered. I kissed the top of her head. "So do I." We stayed like that until she dozed off. The puppy curled at her feet, the house dim and quiet except for the soft hum of the fridge and the distant echo of wheels still turning in my mind. Later, after I carried her to bed, I stood in the doorway and watched her sleep. She clutched the bear like a secret. The jacket still hung over her desk chair. I turned out the light and let go of something I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. For so long, I'd been trying to make up for what she lost, to be both mother and father, to build walls around her heart so she wouldn't feel the hole where he used to be. But she didn't need walls. She needed bridges. And somehow, a group of bikers had come roaring through the wreckage of our grief and laid those bridges down brick by brick. They didn't fix everything. They didn't replace him. But they showed her she wasn't alone in remembering. And sometimes that's enough to begin again. The next morning, she woke before sunrise. "Can I wear my jacket to school?" she asked, eyes hopeful. I hesitated for a second. I knew some kids, maybe even some teachers, might not understand, might see it as strange or too adult. But then I saw her face. She wasn't asking for permission to be different. She was asking to be proud. "Of course," I said. She beamed and slipped it on like armor. That day, she walked taller, didn't wait for me at the classroom door, like usual. She waved goodbye and disappeared into the crowd of backpacks and ponytails and pencil cases. And I stood there, stunned by how fast healing could bloom when love finds the right soil. Weeks passed, then months, but the bikers didn't vanish. They sent postcards from every ride. "Tell Lily we saw a rainbow in Montana, one red." Another came with a keychain. "Rocket needs a spare." They started a tradition. Every year, on her birthday, they'd ride that same route, rain or shine. And every year, one of them would show up with a new patch for her vest. By the time she turned 10, the back of that little jacket looked like a map of stories. She outgrew it eventually, but she never packed it away. It hangs in her room, still, right next to a framed photo from that first birthday ride. Her and her crown, bear in one hand, cupcake in the other, surrounded by a dozen weathered men smiling like they had just remembered what it meant to truly show up. Now, when people ask me about her 6th birthday, I don't say no one came. I say everyone who mattered did. And when they ask how I found the strength to keep going, I smile, and I tell them the truth. I didn't. He did. He sent them. One letter, one girl, one roar of engines that changed everything.